going? I hope you're all having a great day. If you're new to my channel, my name is Andrea and I just want to welcome you and thank you for coming and checking us out. My channel is called Eldon Acres, and today what we're going to do is make one of my very favorite recipes ever. And so this is a recipe that I created quite a few years ago, and typically it's a recipe that we only enjoy on special occasions. So it started out as a recipe that I would make for my husband Brandon and I to celebrate our anniversary. It was kind of the first time that I made it, and then every year thereafter I would make it for our anniversary and special occasions. Actually, I ended up making this recipe on the evening that we got engaged, so it was kind of a funny little story. I was making this pizza for us for supper and I was just about done. I had to go outside for a couple things and I came back into the house, and that's when Brayden proposed to me. So this is kind of a special recipe for us. Tonight we don't really have a special occasion that we're celebrating, but I haven't made it in a long time and I was just really craving it for some reason. So something made me think of it, and so tonight we're making it. So the recipe is prosciutto arugula pizza, and it is to die for. So we're gonna start off by making the pizza dough for the crust. Now, a quick little tip: anytime you're making pizza dough, bread, really anything in your KitchenAid mixer, probably aside from cookies, because usually cookies need a cool batter, but in an application like this, I like to heat up my bowl. So anytime you're using yeast, I guess is maybe the trick, is to heat up your bowl. So I've got some really warm water in here, and I've just kind of been like swishing it around, getting my bowl nice and warm. So my bowl is nice and warm, so I'm gonna go ahead and dump it out. And I'm actually gonna save the water. I know that might seem silly, but we are on a well here and we have run out of water in the past, so I'm just really cautious about water. That water I will actually probably use to water my houseplants. So nothing really goes to waste around here, and especially water. Our well is fine, but I just don't like to waste it. Water is just one of those things. I grew up, we had tons of water, we lived on a well. My husband grew up, they were on a well and they didn't have tons of water. And now we've been here in this house for 6 years. So now I've just become a little bit more cautious, which is not a bad thing. We should be cautious about our water use anyways. So anyways, we've got our preheated bowl here ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to put in here is actually going to be our yeast, and we are going to use an active dry yeast. And for the recipe, we need 2 1/4 teaspoons of active dry yeast. So I'm going to go ahead and measure that out. So with my yeast, and I've mentioned this in a video in the past, sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm getting all of that. I usually buy it in the jar like this, and what I will do is when I open it, 1/4, just making sure I'm not messing it up from the start. When I open my jar of yeast, I will put, I don't know if you can see that there, the date in which I opened it. So this one I opened on June 29th, 2024. See that there? And right on the lid, it actually says, after opening, you're supposed to use it for the best results within 6 months. So June, we are November right now, so I actually don't have a ton of yeast left in here. I've got probably less than 1/4. I don't know if you can see it there. So we're coming into the Christmas season, so it'll actually work out well because I'll usually end up using this up before the 6 months has gone by. It's not usually an issue in our house, but just a little tip. And that way you just make sure that you're not using old yeast, and then you don't get into, wasting flour and that kind of thing on a yeast that's not going to be active and give you that springy bread or dough that you're looking for. So we've got our yeast in here. Now we are going to add 1 1/8 cup of warm water. So I've got that measured out here, and I've got it warm. It's nice and warm from the tap, so that's just going to go in there. Now the warm water just helps the yeast to do its thing a little bit quicker, is my understanding. Now we need a tablespoon of olive oil. You can use any olive oil that you like. This is just an olive oil that I happen to have on hand. It's actually nothing fancy. The nicer the olive oil you have, this would be kind of the time to use it, because you will taste your olive oil in this dough as well as the finished product of the pizza. And now we need to add a tablespoon of honey, and this is a local honey, and I'm going to use my same measuring spoon. I like to do my olive oil first in my measuring spoon, because then your honey should just roll out. I'm trying not to get honey everywhere. So yeah, your honey should just kind of roll out of your measuring spoon because it's already like oiled up. So see, kind of hard to see, but it left my measuring spoon perfectly clean. So that's kind of another little tip there. I'm going to use that same measuring spoon to give this a little stir. That's what we're looking like now. Give it a little stir. And now we're going to let this sit for about 10 minutes. Let that yeast become active. You want it to be foamy on the top of that. So after about 10 minutes, we'll come back. I'll show you what it's looking like, and then we're going to add our flour and get our dough working up. All right, we should be back in about 10 minutes. Okay, friends, so we have our yeast water mixture here. You see how it's nice and foamy. So that's what you want. That means that your yeast is active, it's alive, it's working. You want to see it foaming on top there. That means you're going to get the rise that you need when you're making your dough. So that's wonderful. We're happy with that. So the next step is we need to add our salt and our flour. I'm going to add the salt first because I'm always scared I'm going to forget it. I've forgotten it in the past, and let me tell you, the recipe just doesn't work without the salt. So it is 1 teaspoon of salt. So we've got our 1 teaspoon there. We'll just pop it in. And then we're going to put 3 cups of flour in here. That won't be all of the flour that we need for this recipe, but I like to start with my 3 cups. I'll put it on my mixer, let my mixer get to work, and then I'll probably add some more. We want the texture of this pizza dough to be slightly sticky, but you want to be able to work with it. So I'll show you what I mean. Can't find my words today to describe the consistency we're looking for. So this is my flour jug. It's massive. It fits, I think, 5 kilograms of flour, and I usually go through this. I usually have to fill it up every other month. This time of year we'll go through a lot more flour than we do in the summer. We're coming into the colder months, but okay, so we've got 1. I'm gonna count out loud so I don't mess up. Excuse me, our family is just getting over a cold, which is always fun. So I have to tell you a really funny story about this recipe. So as I mentioned, I created this recipe quite a few years ago. I always had like this pizza dough recipe that I would always use. I had never really written it down. So one day I finally decided to write it down, put it on my Instagram. And then today I went to find my recipe to make the pizza. I use this recipe quite a bit. So I just have like a shelf, like a bookshelf in our dining room that I keep most of my recipes on, my recipe books, that kind of thing. So I'm like rifling through there today and I cannot find it anywhere. I'm looking through the drawers, out in the kitchen. Sometimes, you know, if you're busy, you just kind of throw something in a drawer, you're going to come back to it later. I have looked high and low in this house and I cannot find my written copy of this recipe. I have no idea where I put it. So I'm panicking because I had completely forgotten that I had written it up and put it on my Instagram and shared it with friends and family. So I'm panicking. I'm like racking my brain, writing down things. You know, I have the recipe pretty well memorized, but, you know, not perfectly memorized. So I am full on panicking. Called my husband. I said, Brendan, like, do you have any idea where I put the recipe? Like, I can't find it. You know, I'm panicking. It's one of our favorites. He's like, no, I haven't seen it. Like, when did you last make it? It's been a long time since I last made it. I couldn't remember when. So anyways, I'm looking through my phone and I finally thought to do like, you know, a search on your iPhone. So I searched and it came up in my pictures. And I'm like, what in the world? Anyway, so I pulled it up. Sure enough, then it all comes back to me that I had written out this recipe. I had created a Canva recipe card, saved it to my photos, shared it on my Instagram. So it turns out I have the recipe in multiple places on my phone, so it wasn't that much of a panic, but let me tell you, I was very concerned. So I have reprinted my own recipe, which I will share down below, and then you can always find it on my Instagram as well because it's got a permanent place there. But let me tell you, now I think I'm gonna have to sit down one of these days and go through all my recipes because I literally have recipes everywhere in this house. While I was looking for this recipe, I found so many recipes just kind of like tucked away in cupboards or set on shelves, tucked away in other cookbooks. Like, I'm terrible for printing off recipes and then I'll make it once and think, oh, this is a great recipe, I need to tuck it away and make it again, and then I forget all about it. So that's kind of a funny story. Crisis averted, we found the recipe, all is well, we can still make our beloved pizza, but got me into the mood that I need to get things organized around here. Okay, so we're gonna pop this on the KitchenAid, the stand mixer. We're gonna let it do the work. This is how I've always done it. I'm gonna let it knead probably for about 5 minutes. And then, as I said, we'll check the consistency and I'll add more flour from there. So I'll bring you over so that you can see what we're doing too. Okay, so we've got our water, yeast, flour, salt, olive oil, honey mixture, all in here ready to go. So I'm gonna pop it on the KitchenAid. On the stand mixer, I've got my dough attachment already ready to go here. So we're just gonna put it down, turn it on. I'm just gonna put it on the lowest setting just to let this stir to start with, and then we'll get an idea of the texture, the consistency, and then we'll add more flour from there. All right, so our pizza dough has been kneading just for about a minute, but I just wanted to show you kind of the texture that we are at right now. This is the easiest way for me to do it. So it's pretty sticky. So I'm probably gonna add about a 1/4 cup more of dough. Like it's just, and if we do the window pane test, it's just breaking, so, or tearing. So we're gonna add about a 1/4 cup more dough, or flour. So I'll just grab that, we'll put this back down. So, as you all know, I don't really measure. I'm gonna start this up and I'll just slowly add this to incorporate. Bring you in and show you closer just what's happening in here. Okay, so this is what my dough is looking like, but if I move it back, there's quite a bit of flour at the bottom of the bowl. So what I like to do is just kind of do a little bit of hand kneading in the bottom of the mixer bowl just to try and get the rest of that flour incorporated. And then I'll turn, once I get that flour kind of somewhat worked in, I'll turn my mixer back on and let it do kind of the bulk of the work. I just want to make sure that that flour is mixed in. This dough is feeling much nicer. It's much softer now less sticky so it's not kind of sticking to my hands. So I've got that flour worked in. We're gonna turn it back on. That looks much better. So I'm gonna leave this to knead for another 3 minutes, and then we will come back. I'll show you what we're looking like and what the next steps are. All right, so our dough behind us, I'm sure you can hear it. It's been kneading for about a combined total of 5 minutes now. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch it off. And I'm gonna bring it over. So I'm gonna do this. I just wanted to show you this part. So it's all of it stuck on our hook. Whoops, I almost lost it. So it's come together beautifully. So it's no longer sticking to my hands. It's beautiful, it's soft, it's workable. This is exactly what we want. So I'm just gonna shape it into a ball. And we are just going to put some olive oil in this bowl. We're just gonna coat the bowl. Once I get this shaped into a nice ball, I'm just gonna set this on the counter right there. We'll run some olive oil around the bowl. This is just to prevent any sticking. So I've just got about, I don't know, half a tablespoon or so, maybe a bit more. And I'm just gonna run my hand around in there, get that olive oil all around the sides, because what's going to happen is now I'm gonna put our dough in there. I'm going to roll the ball of dough around and get it coated in the olive oil. And then now that dough is going to rest there. I'm just gonna wash my hands off. So we've got our dough in here. It's oiled, it's sitting here. I have this beautiful bowl cover that I'm going to put over top of it. And now we need to do our first rise with our dough. So I'm gonna set this in a warm place. So we've got our wood stove going today. As you'll see in the beginning of this video, I did light the wood stove today. It's a chilly day here. It's, I think, a high of like 4 degrees, but it's damp, and that's 4 degrees Celsius. Sorry, we're in Ontario, Canada, so we typically run in Celsius for the most part. I try to do both, but that's what I heard today is 4 degrees Celsius. So it's chilly, it's damp, it's almost the middle of November. It's what to be expected. So we've got our wood stove going, so I'm actually gonna set this in the living room just beside the wood stove. It'll do its first rise. So at this point, I am going to leave it for, I always forget this part. I'm gonna let it sit in a warm place for 1 to 1.5 hours to rise. So basically, you want it to double in size. If you don't have a warm place in your home, I know not everybody keeps their house toasty warm, and not everybody has a wood stove. So if your house is a little bit cooler, a little trick that you can do is put it inside your oven and just turn the light on, your oven light on. Leave the light on in your oven, and that will create enough heat. It's like the perfect environment to put dough in to rise. So that's a little trick. I use that trick sometimes if I need to, but this time of year, we've always got our wood stove going. So we'll just tuck this beside the wood stove. It'll be the perfect warm environment for it. It'll do its rise, and then once it's completed its rise, we will be ready to start the pizza process. So that's the nice thing with this dough. It only takes 1 rise. You don't have to do the double rise or anything like that. It does take the 1.5 hours. Depending on the temperature where you put it, you can speed that along, but I'll just leave it for the 1.5 hours, and then we will assemble this and have a very delicious supper. So I'll see you back here when we are ready to do that part.
All right, friends, we are preheating our oven. Now, I'm preheating my oven to 500 degrees because I am using a stone pan. If you are using anything other than a stone pan, you're going to preheat your oven to 450 degrees. Our dough has been rising beside the fireplace for about 1.5 hours now. It has more than doubled in size, and it is looking absolutely beautiful. I forgot to press play when I started recording this, so you didn't get to watch me punch down our beautiful dough. But all I did before this started here was I punched down our dough, took it out, and put it straight onto my stone pan. I find this to be the easiest way. I just roll it out and shape it directly to my stone pan because that's what I am going to be baking it on. So it just, you know, kind of removes the step of rolling it out and then transferring it. This works really well for me. Now, in the past, I have cut this dough in half and done 2 separate pizzas on a smaller pan. That works really well too. But I knew on this night that it was just going to be my husband and I enjoying this pizza, so I knew that I was just going to use this stone pan for the entire dough. So that's what I do here. I just stretch it out. I put it up over the edge of the pan for kind of more of a crust. You don't have to do that. You can do whatever you prefer, but this is what works well for us, and this is how we like to enjoy it. So we're just going to stretch the dough out over the entire pan here. It's really lovely and soft at this point. It's really easy to work with, but it does tend to bounce back a little bit. That's why I kind of hook it over the edges. That just ensures that it's not going to bounce back and it's going to hold its shape and keep that crust in the position we need. Now moving on, we are going to prepare the dough to go into the oven. Now, of course, I don't measure this part, but we put a drizzle of olive oil on the dough. I like to rub it in with my hands just to ensure that the dough is completely covered in that olive oil. Once you have the olive oil worked in, we are going to transfer the dough into our preheated oven. Again, my oven is preheated to 500, and it's going to go into the preheated oven for 7 to 9 minutes. I find that 7 minutes is plenty. While your pizza dough is baking in the oven, I find it best to prepare the rest of the ingredients that we're going to need next. We use a ton of garlic. As I have mentioned in my previous videos, we love garlic. So the recipe calls for, I believe it is 4 cloves of garlic. In this instance, I think I use 6. Now, I like to use mozzarella, a fresh-ish mozzarella ball, and I like to cut it up into kind of slices just to make it easier. Here our dough is coming out of the first round in the oven, so we add more olive oil as well as our minced garlic to the top. I like to make sure we get all that garlic on there. I like to use a pastry brush just to make sure that the entire dough, or the entire crust I should say, is completely covered in that lovely olive oil and garlic mix. Next up, we are going to add some dried oregano. Now, I, again, don't really measure the oregano, but my recipe calls for a teaspoon. I think I need to alter the recipe because it's probably more like 2 teaspoons. Now we're going to add our sliced fresh mozzarella to the top. And I find this process works really well just to have it sliced in kind of bite-sized pieces. Next up, we're going to add some shredded Parmesan. Now, I have used Parmesan petals in the past, and that works really well also. Now our pizza dough goes into the oven for another 5 to 6 minutes to melt that cheese and get it nice and bubbly. As you can see, it comes out absolutely beautiful. At that point, while the dough was in the oven, I prepared my prosciutto. I like to cut it in half so that it's easy just to tear and put on top. We like prosciutto, so we use quite a bit of it, but I just kind of tear it up into pieces, put it on top, and you know, a pretty heavy hand with the prosciutto. You can put on as much as your family likes, but we like to load it up. This is our supper time meal. So now the prosciutto goes back into the pizza, I should say, goes back into the oven for a final 5 to 7 minutes. While that's into the oven, we prepare our arugula. So I do about half a package of arugula, and we add salt and pepper as well as red pepper flakes and a drizzle of olive oil. Mix it all up, and I let it sit while the pizza is finishing up in the oven. Oh, and how good does this look? So the last step is to ensure that your prosciutto gets nice and crispy. So I usually bake it for about 5 minutes, and then I will switch it over to broil for the final 2 minutes, making a total of 7 minutes in the oven for the last step. Once it comes out of the oven, you are going to add your prepared arugula mix to the top, and you can again put as much or as little arugula on the top as you want, or you could even leave it out if you don't love arugula. But personally, it just adds a beautiful peppery freshness to the top, and let me tell you, it is absolutely delicious. I don't think you'll regret adding the arugula. The final step, and arguably the most important step to this pizza, is adding a good healthy amount of balsamic glaze. So this is the brand I like. It's just a PC balsamic glaze, and we like quite a bit of it. Again, you can add however much or little that your family likes, but we like a good healthy dose of it. And how delicious does that look? All right, friends, so we have supper. How good does that look? Oh my goodness, I cannot wait to eat that. So today's video was a little bit different than normal. My family got home and there was lots of noise in the background, so I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to continue on making supper and we'll just do a video a little bit different today than normally. So this is supper. So this is my prosciutto arugula pizza. So we've got our balsamic glaze on top. Now this is best served right away, served hot. Tonight we won't be able to eat it right away. It's just sometimes how things go, but it reheats beautifully in the air fryer. So if you have an air fryer and you've got leftovers, reheat it in the air fryer. It is so good. I'm sorry if you can hear noise in the background. My daughter's just getting ready for bed and she doesn't love this part of the day, so it might be a little bit noisy in the background, so I do apologize. But anyways, that's it for today's video, guys. I wanted to thank you so much for joining me today. I will write out the recipe below for you if you wanted to try this. Again, this is one of our very favorite pizza recipes. It's perfect for a special occasion. It's great if you wanted to impress somebody. Honestly, it's super easy to make from scratch, like right from the dough to the end product. It doesn't take much time and it turns out beautifully. Absolutely delicious. I highly recommend. So again, I wanted to thank you guys so much for joining us today, and I hope you're having a great night. Take care, friends.